Hello, everyone. This is Gregg and Mira, and this is our seventh episode. So we managed to have seven episodes until now, which is great. That's fantastic. And today we will talk about incels, which is not a new topic, but during our last episode about the 4B movement in South Korea, I think that was an issue that came up in the articles and papers that we were reading. So we decided that we should discuss about this issue, even though it's not new, but it's such a complex issue that we have a lot to talk. And I think that that's usually 45-ish minutes will not be enough. So because I talked too much last time, I think that this time it's Greg's.
She's trying to bait me into saying she talks too much. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to
I
take it.
mean, no, I say it myself that I talk too much. So I will try to restrain myself today. It will be hard, but I will try. So, Craig, do you want to start with
With
just
incels?
presenting the topic of today?
Yes, Professor. All right. So incels, the incel movement is basically funded on the idea of involuntary celibacy. You know, the fact that there are these groups of men, and their universe is kind of centered around the internet, and they're on websites like Reddit and 4chan and Chan and all the other different strangely named websites and chat rooms or chat room pages where people are going and they're basically open about what's happening with their lives, and they blame society and women often in a lot of situations for their lack of social abilities, which leads to lack of ability to find sex. So they're celibate because of society. Like Amira's talk, they're saying that this is kind of um, an older topic. You know, you could track it down to as early as like 2002 when the term was coined on a chat board by a Canadian college student. Basically, she was just trying to open up dialogue with people that are in the same situation where they're not having a lot of success in their relationships or in obtaining sexual gratification. And it was meant to be, like a healing place, and then it got kind of taken over by this group of men that are someplace between 15 and 25, rough numbers of the group, and are basically finding themselves to be inadequate, if you will, for the needs of the social universe that we live in, the social media universe that we live in, where everything is a picture or a meme or a thumbnail, and that's supposed to be, all of the value of the human. And it's super interesting. A lot of the background is also based on what seems like a worshiping of some of these men who have killed in mass murders and in individual murders, and they're basically looked at as as, I don't want to say gods, but as like the perpetrators of this movement and how it's kind of gained steam and how it's moved forward. So that's kind of a longer. I know you talk a lot. I talk a lot too. That's kind of a longer definition, and I'm sure I missed a bunch, but there's a whole lot of terms on you need to learn a whole new language in order to understand the incel community. And then from there's follow on where there's like now the fem incel and female incels, which incel men would say is an impossibility. So it's super interesting. I'm not sure how far we can go into it without kind of going back and forth. So what did I miss?
I mean, I think you know more than me about this topic, but I was quite impressed when I was reading about it because I had this idea. I mean, I had heard about incels, especially after the killings in Canada, if I'm not wrong. And this guy who I think that he jumped in the sideway with his van and killed many women. And then they found out that he was like kind of writing or reading an incel manifesto. And I think that they also call him, as you said, by Saint X. I don't remember his name now.
No, you're talking about Elliot Rogers is the guy from California, and they call
Yeah.
him the Supreme Gentleman, which I
Ah,
hate to
okay.
say it's kind of a cool name, but there's some supremacy ideas
Yeah.
built into that
And
name tag. But the Canadian, there's a couple of different Canadian ones. Not to interrupt, but yeah, there's a couple of different examples of Canadians who did exactly what you're talking about. They ran people over on the sidewalk and killed mass people.
yes,
Through
like
'em.
women, like specifically women. So,
Well, the Supreme Gentleman, strangely enough, Elliot Rogers, the first three people he killed on his murder spree were either friends of his or people that he knew, and they were all males.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
not that.
no, I mean, I was just referring to the Canadian cases that they were like purposely killing women because they were feeling to be disappointed or oppressed or not valued by women. And this is the moment where when I started to hear about incels, and it was always in this idea that yeah, this is a bunch of men who hate women. So, and although I understand that there are many of men in these groups that yeah, hate women in the sense that they see women as the cause of all their like distress and unhappiness, etc. By reading some papers and also by reading a lot of comments in one of the Reddit threads, no, do you say Reddit threads? No, there is another term, but I'm not an expert in Reddit. So, anyway, you understand what I mean. And so I really understood that it was far more complex than just a bunch of women haters because it was, and even the first time that we discussed about it, I mentioned, oh, maybe we can link it to the construction of masculinity because that was my idea. So that this is something that now you will joke with me about the use of the patriarchal system, but this is something that is the result of our patriarchal society. So we have this, yes, we have this construction of masculinity like being the strong man, the perfect man, the muscled man, the man with a lot of money who is the breadwinner, the exclusive breadwinner, who is very good looking, whatever that means. I mean, because I think that this is kind of very subjective, but anyway. So we have built these kind of models for the good looking guy. So, and if you're not that, you're a failed man or you're not man enough, etc., etc. So there is such a huge stigma about young men who are not fulfilling all these things that are associated or are expected from them. So I understood that there are also groups where, especially these young men, they just talk about themselves in a kind of expressing their distress or their unhappiness. And it might be considered as a safe place. So I didn't go into the groups because, I mean, I don't know how it works, but also I wanted to spare myself of reading comments that maybe I wouldn't be happy. Yeah. I mean, it's as a person who has been sexually aggressed by men when I was a teenager, so I'm kind of trying to keep myself sane as much as possible. So I know what happens, but I don't want really to have it like firsthand to read their comments. So I read the comments of other people over their comments, which comes a little bit like more softened. I think that this is the part that in general we are missing. I mean, we are missing maybe mostly in the social media because we both saw that there are so many academic articles about incels. But in the general culture, we see them just as in a very, very bad way or stigmatized or I will mention his name again, like, my goodness, but it's like every incel, it's an Andrew Tate. I don't think that Andrew Tate it's an incel, so nothing to do. He maybe is exploiting all the incel culture, but nothing to do with it. But we see them all as evil as him. Like, for me, is kind of a very bad person. I don't care about his personality. He's doing like he's spreading a very hateful message. So that's the most important for me. And there are so many other men, or young men especially, who are not doing this. It's just that they do not find themselves in this society who is expecting from them something. So I am tending to understand how can we help them as long as it's possible to help them, like especially when they are teenagers, because it's at that moment that all the distress starts.
You know,
Sorry for making it very academical, but like I was just trying to throw all my ideas in the same time.
no. First off, I don't want to gloss over any abuse that you were part of. So I apologize for that having to be the case. Don't know how I could help that. Maybe something we'll talk about another time. But as far as like these Reddit posts and all these chat rooms being a safe space, I think that is what exactly it's supposed to be. And I think that it's, to be perfectly honest, I find it some of these chat spaces to be, some of these guys to be pretty brave to be able to show their souls out there on the internet in front of, I mean, obviously they're nameless, nobody knows who they really are, but still to stop and write down something that intimate about your thoughts and beliefs, that takes a lot of courage to share that. And I understand the idea of doing that to get the reflection of other people to see if somebody else has an opinion on it, and maybe that to turn that safe space into a healing space. I recognize that. I don't think that's how it ever turns out to be. Reddit, post or more just to harass people or to make comments or that get people excited or get people responding. That's what the websites are for these days. But ideally, I like the idea of these places being a safe space in a place where they can find some answers to the questions they have. Am I alone in this situation of kind of being left behind by humanity? I have thoughts on that both directions. It's like, yes, I understand that all people are going to have difficulties, and this is a difficulty that men seem to have, in general. But then again, I understand that this is a horrible thing to say. That's kind of like, that's how future generations are created. The people that are successful in mating have children, and then that's how their portion of society continues on. Those that are not successful, they don't. They go the way of the dodo. And, I'm sorry, that's just a truth of it. That is a truth of the situation. I want to hit on the idea of the patriarchy too, because 99.7% of every incel chat board is going to tell you that the main reason that incels exist is because of the rise of feminism. And that feminism is the first prime mover in this argument of what has created the incels. Either that's through your patriotic society that kind of, we had a system where there were 20 men and 20 women, and they would all end up finding one another, and they would then you'd have 20 couples, as opposed to kind of the way society seems now, where you have 20 men and 20 women. 7 of the women are with 7 of the other women, and whatever. There's all these combinations that are not of the standard man
That has
woman
nothing to
relation.
do with feminism.
Well, no. I'm just saying that was what incels
Okay.
believe to be the catalyst of creating this system where men find themselves to be outnumbered by other men and no longer capable of finding, a mate. So
Yeah,
I'm not
but
saying I agree with that, but I can
I
see
know.
where if you're going to complain about men and say there's a patriarchy, and that's going to cause the creation of women saying, well, the problem is men, so now we're all feminists. There's always going to be like a follow-on group of people that is challenging that last group of people.
I mean, first, there is this huge misunderstanding about feminism in the sense that it's never required or it's looking for more rights for women. So it just wants the same rights for everyone. So, saying it very simply. And when I was referring to the patriarchal society, it's like how we are told that we are. It's what creates, first of all, to have some expectation for women that, okay, I'm repeating myself, are just like to serve men and the family. And then to have this expectation for man that you should be this strong, you should not cry, you should not show emotions, etc., etc. So, and it's a kind of paradoxical situation because most of the incels do not, I mean, they are in distress because of what society is expecting from them, and they are not complying with these expectations. But it's this society, again, who is also oppressing women. Do they want to be part of this society that is oppressing also themselves? I mean, okay, they are not like reflecting so much, etc., etc. But it's so paradoxical to be in this kind of society. Don't say 99%. It's not 99% that think that women are and feminism it's their the cause of their distress, because I've seen some comments who,
Incels?
Yeah.
Yeah, incels, they almost 100% call out feminism as a major issue with the creation of the incel movement.
I saw
Because
some former
just
incels who
formal incels,
former they were part of
formers,
incel groups, and and they were saying that it's not feminism, it's not women, but it's the patriarchal society, and I was so happy to have these guys understanding.
I bet that's what you wanted to hear.
Yes.
You know what? You can't just look at society and say that's all society is based on patriarchy, because that's what you're doing.
Mm,
You're saying that all society is patriarchy.
I think
And women have
99%.
never had a decision. They've never made a decision in the entire existence of
No,
man.
no, no, no. I'm not such extreme. No. I mean, most of our societies are based on a patriarchal system. So I'm not saying 100% because I cannot say that, but most of them are. Even the Nordic countries who are like the more gender equal, etc., still the system is a patriarchal system. So, I mean, I'm not dreaming about
Well,
it.
the reason, I stumbled onto this whole incel movement is looking at the 4B movement,
Yeah.
extreme
But there is,
feminism with the idea of not marrying, dating, having sex, or having kids.
yeah, but maybe they are doing this because of some incels who want to kill them if they are not having
Oh my
sex with
God.
them.
Chicken and the egg. So you're saying incels started first. Involuntary celibacy started before other people,
No,
before
no,
women
maybe
existed.
the oppression of women and forcing them to have sex with you and killing them because they don't want to have sex with you. Maybe that what started the 4B or whatever other movement.
Okay, so
So this is our patriarchal society. I don't want to say who started what because I'm not sure that there is. What am I saying? It's a system who men dominates. But
say that
yeah, I
again.
mean, I mentioned no, it's like a system where some men who do not want to change their status quo, also some women, but mostly men, they are dominating women and also most of the men. I mean, I just mentioned Andrew Tate. Isn't he exploiting other men just to become a powerful guy? Yes, that's what
I
he's
mean,
doing.
you can say the same about any woman who's taken her clothes off and had pictures of her put into a magazine. You could say the same thing about any other
But
man who's worked in the.
she's not spreading hate against, I mean,
I
okay, please go on.
if you're going to bait people with something they like, it's like having a big picture of a chocolate cake or a chocolate cake, in front of a bunch of people that are starving to death. And just, here's this wonderful cake. Just look at it. Here you go. Just look at it. I mean, the whole idea of showing something to somebody and saying, here, you can't have it, is manipulation. So
Yes.
if I'm not a fan of Tick or whatever the hell his name is, if people are watching him and are being entertained by him, I don't know what to say about that. I don't watch him. I'm not entertained by him, but I recognize there are people that they love listening to his content. How is he any different from any other person that's exploiting any other person?
I mean, it depends on the
It's
content
his
that you
message.
are using. Yes. So, and I mean, I think that he found the terrain. Yes, you can say that. Like an empty
What?
space. And he found a gap there, especially for
Yeah.
young men and teenagers. And he
Yeah.
just started to fill it with something that could really work in this society where, especially teenagers, they don't really know where they are. Also, especially with changing our way or perceiving the femininity and masculinity, etc., and also in the conflict with our parents or the school or the images that are being spread. So he really found this gap and he's filling it very well for his purposes. That's why so many teenagers are a fan of him because it's not that they have something else to not to be just entertained but also to be educated. That's what I think that it's the very bad thing of how he's exploiting also this kind of distress that it's so strong among boys
Yeah.
in the younger age.
I mean,
So that's the
the entire incel community is basically made up of that same demographic, that same
yeah.
15 25 of younger people who are making up their idea of who they are and what the world is, and they're all falling for this extreme content. The content that is taboo in the previous generation or has never been explored, like Andrew Tate's. I'm not saying I enjoy any. I've never listened to the guy. I don't know what his misogynist content is, but obviously the fact that it appeals to this small community, why do you have such a problem with it? I understand it's bad, hateful content, but there's all kinds of people exploiting other people with bad, hateful content. I don't know. Let's get
I
back to
mean,
the
okay,
incels.
first of all, no, first of all, I'm a feminist. So women's rights and men's rights and everybody's rights, this is what is really important for me and all these relations between genders. So this is my work. So this is why I focus on all these. I mean, it might be Andrew Tate, it might be, what's his name? I forgot. The Canadian
Let's say
guy.
Jordan
Or his,
Peterson.
yeah. So, yeah, that's it. So, I mean, one is like the academic, the other it's like the, I don't know, the bad boy, etc., etc. But for me, it goes in the same direction. So that's why I'm more interested in them than the others. But it's not something that it's detached from the other aspects of our society. Like I was just looking today at old documentary in the French television, and they were asking young women about the virginity, yes, being virgins or not. It was in the 76, and they were asking these young women that how do you think about being virgin, and this is something like mandatory for women but it's not for men. And so they were, oh yes, this is a very, I really hope that my partner, he has had many experiences before me, but I prefer to be a virgin. Like, first of all, why our society is requiring just for women to be virgins and not for men? Why our society is requiring different things? So why being a virgin it's so hugely idealized just for women and not for men, for example?
I think you know the answer to those questions. First off, it
I
seems like
know.
it seems like you don't yet appreciate the incel movement because all your questions. First off, you know what? You always say that you're a feminist, so you want the rights of all the people. Why don't you just say you're a humanist?
Yes.
Why don't you just call yourself a
No,
humanist?
I'm not a
There you
humanist
go.
because
So now,
no.
then you're crossing into the idea that these women, they're happy to be virgins, which is fine, but it seems like you're not even looking into the plight of men who are not happy to be virgins. And then you're asking the question of why are people not the same? Well, the people are not the same because they're entirely different. There's a huge difference between men and women. The studies try to equate the sex drive that a man has compared to the woman is like the difference between a man's upper body strength to a woman. It's several times increased over a woman. So that's there are differences between men and women. That's why we're different, because we're different. That sounds like the ultimate tautology, but you have to accept that at some point. You have to accept.
Biologically, not socially.
Oh my God, how are they separate?
It's completely different.
But no, you're right. You're right. They are completely different. The motivations of
Yeah.
women and the motivations of men are completely different. Ergo, they're going to behave differently, even in society.
No, I mean, but the social thing is something that changes from society to society. So that's why our societies are different, and that's why we have changed in time. I mean, a man today, it's not the man that was 100 years ago in United States. It has changed.
I
You
agree.
said last time, yes, that they are going with children and taking children from kindergartens, etc., etc., something that did not happen 100 years ago. So this is the social part that is changing. And this is not the biological part. They were stronger than women biologically, and they are still stronger than women biologically.
Okay, and that
But the
equates into many
social,
different aspects of of society. That applies to the hunter-gatherer context. That applies to physical
we're
labor,
not a hunter
work.
gatherer context anymore.
What's
It
that?
has changed. We're
Okay.
not in the
I
same
started
context
there
anymore.
because that would be a good example of the difference between men and women in society. And then I
Some
moved on.
centuries ago.
And then I'm moving on. If I weren't interrupted, I would be moving on to more current examples.
Please go on.
Okay, so men in the labor market today, that physical strength equates to a great deal of the professions out there. Any physical profession, I love the little memes of when women are backing men. I love that. They'll look at these videos of these horrible jobs, like guys at oil derricks, oil rigs, or deep sea fishing, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to do this job?" No, they don't. They don't want to do those jobs. And that's proven by the fact that they don't do them. So that's just another significant difference between men and women based on physiology, physical capabilities, characteristics that separates the behavior of men and women. So you can't just cattle us together and just say, okay, we're all humans. One's man, one's woman, but so we're all the same. That's just not the way it works. And that's why this incel movement is so radical in the fact that it's identifying a physiological difference in men, that constant wanting for sex, and a mathematical inability to achieve it. There's some numbers like in China, there's like between, I've seen different figures, so like 20 to 60 million more men than women. That means that that's dozens of millions of men that will never have a prospect of ever being married. And for me, that's like the core idea of this Americanized version, or this nouveau version of incel, where these are just men, boys, complaining about the fact that they have virtually no prospect of finding a mate, let alone having any type of sexual bliss, the type that's advertised on TV and perpetrated through online porn and, basically the internet, to create a hole in society. And
And why is this a women's fault on feminists' fault?
nobody said it's a woman's fault.
No, they are saying. So why
Incels
they
are
are saying
saying that
that?
the rise of the feminist movement, which has brought more of a competition to the dating environment, and then that comes up. We were talking about the 80-20 rule. I can't remember the actual Italian, representation of
Pareto,
I'm sorry. What is it?
Pareto, Pareto.
I gotcha. And I mean, the understanding that you're giving a very small portion of your effort to get a majority of your outcome, and the lexicon switches over in the incel community by something like, here, I'll read it. Here's the definition of the 80 rule. It's a rule to illustrate the distribution of effects of power law, and predicts that in many situations, 80% of the outcome is produced by 20% of its causes. And the incel community has turned that into, assumes that 80% of the women are accessing the top 20% of men in society, leaving the remaining 80% of men to basically to have essentially the idea that they have no hope in ever finding a woman. So it's not that feminine is being blamed for it. It's just the idea that feminism has grown the female's sexual capital, if you want to call it that, and their ability to select the mates they want to have sex with, and abandon all others. Again, this isn't my philosophy. This is the incel philosophy.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm just hearing. So I had no idea about this interpretation of the 2080. But, it's not a feminist, just to be clear. All this kind of a sexual, I mean, feminism, it's completely against the sexual objectification. And also, I'm just trying to understand, which is like maybe my professional disease, like to understand why that would happen if it was true, fully true, that all women, and in many cases it is true, they are just looking for the richest guy, or for the most, like, I don't know, good looking, etc., etc. Because maybe this is something that we're told, and when I say we, I mean mostly of women, since we're young children, that you have to find a rich guy in order to have this fantastic life, because you cannot be independent economically because you're a woman. So we still go to this, how we educate boys and girls in our homes, and with our books and with our TV programs, etc., etc. So the summum of achievement for a young woman would be to find a rich, good looking, I don't know, a sportsman, a champion, blah blah blah, that would have a lot of money and he could keep her. And I assure you that feminism is completely against this, because feminism would be like women to be independent and not depending on men or their parents or whatever, or men or women in the same logic. So I think we're still kind of victims of our society, so being that men or women. So as long as we don't change it, nothing will change. So incels, they will be there. And were you saying that I have this negative opinion about incels? Because I mean, I might be really angry when I see some of their comments against women, but
Well, you should have negative opinions about some of them, especially the ones that are murdering people and that
yes.
are making these horrible comments. But some of them are just
And
opening their selves up to.
absolutely, yes. And also just the idea of them being, and I think that you said it, so it's such a brave thing to say and to express all the weaknesses or all the distress that they experience. And my thought, I mean, of course, I have some problems with what is being called like the misogyn incels, because not all of them are misogyn. So, and I'm just trying to understand how those who are really in this huge distress, because they do not like feel as they correspond to the expectations of the society, to have a girlfriend, like, okay, you're not finding a girlfriend. What's this big deal? You can find it some after some other years. I mean, why are not women going there and killing people if they are not finding a boyfriend?
I think that's what you're kind of glossing over. Those are the significant differences. The fact that you keep saying that women are now enlightened and they can choose.
No, they are not enlightened.
I don't.
Oh,
I
oh yes, yes, yes. I got it.
and they can now have the right to break away from society. I think you did say that, but I think you're implying the idea that women now
Mm-hmm.
can break away from society. They can choose the man that they want, regardless of what society tells them. But you're saying something by not saying it. Women don't have that same drive for sex that men do. I don't know why this a large emotional reaction is coming out now. Does it mean you
No,
don't believe
because I've been listening to this for so many years, and I mean, who
and you don't
said
accept
that's
it?
true?
Oh my,
No,
that's wow. So are you suggesting that's not the case?
of course not.
So you agree with it?
With what?
The
No,
idea
I
that
agree
more
that the
sex be
sexual impulses or the sexual drive, I think it's the same.
no, no, no.
Okay.
If that's what you believe, that actually answers a lot of questions of why this conversation is going like this. You don't have any appreciation for the suffering of these guys. Again, not the right to go kill anybody, not the right to, it doesn't give you the right to hate on anybody, but these people are living in a world that tells them that their physical impulses to have sex are basically all that life is about, and they're failing in their ability to achieve that. So they are in essence not living a life. And maybe you should just imagine for a moment that you're entirely wrong, which you are, about the difference between men and women, and just imagine having this compulsion that it's been recorded like hundreds of times a day, a minute, that men are compulsed into this behavior. I don't think a woman can. I'm not trying to be sexist here, but just the look on
Okay.
your face tells me that you can't even put yourself in that position to deal with that type of motivation, that infernal motivation that just pushes you to be in competition with every other man and a competition with yourself, competition with women. You're in continual, perpetual competition for something you can never achieve. That's. I mean, honestly, you could make a goddamn good argument for not wanting to appreciate that life.
Yeah. And I fully agree on it.
But you don't agree on the fundamental principles that men and women are different. What makes you believe that, if you don't mind me asking?
I really don't see any evidence that could prove, apart from all the sugarcoating that we have done to gender roles, then women and men are different on that part. And I also know from some readings of French psychoanalysts and psychiatrists that women have a very developed sexuality that has been repressed for many years and centuries. So I think that you should be happy about it. Like, why are you so sad? But
Well, I can't understand the
you
idea.
don't
What
agree. I know.
I don't agree. I don't
But
agree. I mean,
no,
testosterone
it's okay.
testosterone is
No, it's
something that
I mean,
physically makes you have sexual desire. Men have more testosterone than women by the thousands.
I
Men is
have I have many girlfriends, like women, female friends, if I could say, believe the same as you, but it doesn't mean that I believe the same as you all. So, I mean, and of course, that being, as I said, a sociologist, I tend to explain everything from a social point of view.
well, we're definitely not going to see eye to eye on this. I guess maybe one of our next discussions should be about some studies that indicate, and prove, I'd say, the differences between men and women. Because it seems like without that understanding, you're gonna have a hard time really digging deep into the motivation of the incel community. If you don't
I mean,
understand the motivation, you can't understand anything, any part of it.
I'm not a one-dimensional person in the sense that I can make abstraction of people's sufferings even if I'm not going through them. So I don't think that I have to go through the suffering of someone in order to understand that he or she is suffering. So, and not fully because I cannot say these words, but I really understand that there is a huge unease and anxiety among these young men or men. So, of course, I understand it. And I cannot maybe try the sexual impulse that you are talking about, but I understand that they feel very bad in their environment, in relation to their family, society, and everything. And maybe this is something that, even if it's not regarding I don't know, your relationships, many people and many women and myself, maybe we have gone through a lot of other sufferings compared to our society. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can imagine
sure.
that you're,
There's
yeah,
there, there's
but I
all
mean,
kinds of
I'm just,
suffering there.
yes. So I can, as I said, I can kind of make an abstraction of the suffering. So now for me, the issue is understand it like better and I'm so happy and work toward it. And I think that I mentioned to you that there was this fantastic institution in US because that's the problem that sometimes I feel being a feminist that I cannot really talk too much about man related issues because maybe some left wing people will say to me that this is not a feminist issue. And on the other side, right wing people will say, oh, it's your fault because you're a feminist. So that's why we have this issue. So, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to when you're a feminist. Not that I'm complaining because it's not that I care about the others' opinions toward my feminism, but in the sense that when you talk about men's rights or men distress or how men also are suffering from our social expectations. So some people might say, oh, but you're a feminist, so you're just for women's rights. So no, and I just lost my argument. I
Yes.
was talking about this American. No. I was talking about the American Institute for Boys and Men, and which is a great institution because I think that yes, we can very well work with boys and men without being like against women, so nothing to do with it. So it's like you're working with boys and men because of a better society, whatever it is, because I know that you don't really like these terms like better society because you think that they are very idealistic, so I know, but
No. Don't put that on me. I want a better world.
no,
No, I want a realistic world, a
I'm
better
just
realistic version.
that the
They're better,
realistic that
meaning it can't happen.
um
It can't exist.
no
Okay. So, I was thinking about this horrible analogy. So are you saying I'm blue
no
pilled?
no
Is
go
that what you're telling me? I'm living in the world of bliss
what
that does not exist? Because I would say I live
no
in the
when you
real
say
world, the world that is given to me.
yeah, and I wanted to change.
I also wanted to change, and that's why I'm not going to let you pigeonhole me because you're trying to put me in this category that I understand the world as a real place, but I don't want it to be better. That's not what my realism is. My realism is I want a better real place, something that can exist, not like, free everything for everybody. We didn't even talk about
Can you
incel that
imagine?
much. We barely
I
even
talked a
talked about it.
lot. So, go on. What was the horrible analogy that you were going to do?
Well, I don't want to beat the male libido to death, but I think if you try to understand it like a little bit more, like I think women look at sex as like after they've had breakfast in the morning, they may or may not have lunch, but it's always available, and so is dinner. A male looks at sex like he hasn't eaten in 30 days and he might never eat again.
Okay, I like that. I know these
It's
kind of women.
drastically different from the idea that men and women have the same libido. Drastically.
I still don't agree.
I think I'm going to need you to agree with that. I'm going to need to be the patriarch here. It's a joke.
Yeah, you're
It's
older.
a joke.
You're older.
Calm down.
I mean, as an Albanian, I should respect the older people.
So I wanted to hit some of the things that are prevalent in incel lore. That it's a racist movement. That it's a white only movement. That it's a right leaning movement. So there are a lot of studies out there, but some of the I thought was particularly interesting. The average age, according to one study I'm drawing this material from, is 27. And you heard me continuously talk about the idea that
Yeah.
incels primarily, between 15 and 25. But then the average inceller is 27. It's kind of peculiar, but that indicates to me that this community is an aging community and it's a phenomena that's going on. It doesn't just end, once you meet a certain person or you get to a certain age. These are people that are living, maybe their entire life, going into fees and feasts without having sex. So the average being that high, 27 years old, it indicates to me that the entirety of this population is older, older than we anticipate when you start, thinking about something that's based primarily in the internet. A majority of them identify as neat, which is an interesting term, not in education, in what is the other one? Not in education, not in training, and not employed. Not education, employed, or training. 36% are people of color, which is again, that's a pretty high number if this is supposedly a
Yeah.
white only community. So that indicates to me that it's probably not. It's probably white leaning, and maybe that could be explained by the idea that there's more white people on the internet than there are a lot of people of color, with the exception of Asians. I think the Asian community has been identified as using the internet more than any other race of people. 39% are right leaning, 49 are left leaning, 17 are centrist. That tells me that it's a not a fringe as far as politically fringe. They're all pretty centrist. They're all pretty marginally left, marginally right, or in the center. This is a strange number. 3% of posts are racist. That's a low number for a community that is supposedly, white supremacist or white leaning. That 3% of the posts are racist. I mean, let's face it, I would suggest that a great deal of the posts that are racist are made in jest. Somebody that's sensitive could, take it in a bad way still, but racist comments are not always made just to be racist. Some of them, sometimes they're just extreme content, something we were talking about earlier. The idea of the incel is based on the idea of self-hatred. And I think that's so unique with this community, in the fact that the origin of this is the heavy origin is when these young men are getting on chats and they're starting to express themselves, to others. And then I'm sure the comments are just going, 1,000 different directions. But the idea that it's all based on, a self-hate or an insufficiency within the individual. And that's literally what this argument is about. These guys are calling themselves betas. They're secondary to the alpha men, and they're all in competition for the smallest number of residual female partners that exist. The extremists moving to suicide, and the fact that there's so much suicide lexicon or terminology built into their glossary of terms that they're using. Like, what is this one? There's one that's just lay down, die and rot, something like that. There's an acronym for that. There's an acronym for people that are going to potentially murder somebody and then commit suicide afterwards, and that's their ideal. This safe self-hatred, suicidal tendencies. And it's so funny because this has been something that it's been looked at through history in the lens of the young male syndrome. And I know your fan Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. And the idea that the young male syndrome is the situation where men are restless more so than women, more so than the remainder of other men in the society. So these young men, they're restless. They need to be occupied. They have all this sexual tension built up. And some of this is expressed with the idea that, young Viking men, they weren't necessarily just going out to expand their world. Those were the men that were kind of pushed out of their community because their community was getting so big that it couldn't support all the different roles. And there's a great experiment I asked you to read about, the Universe 25 experiment with rats and mice, and some of the conclusions of that, which, quick Reader's Digest, the experiment put a large number of rats or mice together and gave them all the food they want, no predators, gave them the ability to basically breed themselves to oblivion, and they ended up dying out because the societies would get taught that there are too many, and I would even argue male rats and mice in their communities, that they lost the ability to find a role for themselves. And without a role for themselves in society, they moved to behaviors that were basically in opposition to a healthy society, to the point where once these rats and mice learned this behavior, they ended up going extinct to where they were no longer reproducing. And imagine that. Rats and mice, these rodents are known to live in garbage and perpetuate themselves. But when left alone, they found that they couldn't even maintain their own society after this learned behavior. The studies are so interesting. Obviously, you can't apply them directly to humans because humans, not all of us, are rats and mice. But the idea that those behaviors do exist, that's phenomenal for me and I equate that to the incel movement. These are men, with the large amounts of people that we have, our population. I'm not going to say we're overpopulated, but when we have such a large population and all the typical roles in society are filled, when you have this excess or surplus of people, they're looking for new roles, and sometimes they don't find them. And this is a great example. If you have so many men and there's no prospects for them, they have no role in society. What are they, just worker bees? Are they just slaves to the society they're part of? I mean, that's what they are. And if they have no expectations of ever finding, we'll say, a mate or happiness, I see why they lose reason to live, to be perfectly honest. And it's sad. I mean, it's a product of society. It's a product of, being too healthy and having such a great life that you're no longer dependent on trying to maintain your life. That's all given to you. Now you're just trying to find a role in life. And it's just interesting for me. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on the incel. It's a very interesting phenomena and one that should be watched because, I mean, you can't have these people just out and out murdering each other because they can't find a future for themselves.
And when I was mentioning this American Institute for Boys and Men, and I was reading some of their studies, so they were also mentioning that about the high rate of suicide among young men in the US, and also some other surveys, especially regarding educational, so results in college, etc., etc. So that's why they are now working so much with young men. I mean, just to kind of provide some points of reference in society so they can, as you say, find a role or think about something different, that just the only roles that they were thinking of themselves, and that now they are kind of lost. And I was reading about the same topic in UK. It was an article in The Guardian that were saying that our boys are lost, especially, and it was about the teenagers who are just spending their time watching porn or watching kind of different influencers, but they feel completely lost, maybe a little bit like left aside from the educational system or from all the work that needs to be done with them. So, yeah, I mean, if if we would like not to have this huge number of incels in the sense of people who are suffering and who are hating themselves, I think that the work should start quite soon
It's funny, I know
in
I asked you
the
this question offline. If it was found that the internet did harm to society, should we get rid of it? And then you argued that nonstop, but that I think you'd almost
yeah.
never answer the question. But
I answered no. I said no.
reason I asked that question is because here's a quote, and this was the data collected. Every day in the year 2020, humans collectively spent 1 million years on social media. That is ridiculous. I mean, the idea that after a year has gone by, what is that? I don't know. It's 360 billion. I don't know. It's some really big number of people spending time on the internet. I love the internet. We're using it now. I search for it. It's the only tool that is given me an ability to well, it's not true. It's a very valuable tool in how you interact in life in today's age. But it is painfully harmful. It is letting people, it's bringing some topics to the forefront of discussion that might never have shown up in the normal face-to-face interactions that humans have always practiced. And I'm very interested how it's going to turn out. Clearly I'll never get to know, but what the internet has done to society, it will be significant, from here on out. It's just this, incels are a product of that, or bees are a product of that. uh, it's interesting, super interesting. Well, we
I mean,
talked longer than we normally.
internet is
I don't know.
internet is a product of.
I want to hear your internet thoughts.
No, I mean internet is our product too, so.
Yeah, I mean, and really, if you look at it, how can it be a bad thing? It's just a bunch of books, that are online. If you want to look at it in the most simplistic, it's words printed out, pictures. It's just a bunch of books. But the fact that people can update those books, billions of times a second or whatever crazy number can come up with, it's remarkable what humans are going to figure out how to do and how to think, and it's crazy. All right, well, we're way past an hour. I'm happy to keep
Yeah.
going, but who the heck would want to watch that?
No, no, we should keep it at less than 1 hour. So.
Gotcha. All right, well, I guess I'll try to think about sex less and you try to think about it more. I don't know what the philosophy should be in that, but human nature is
We
human nature. You can't fight it.
we will
No,
cut this afterward, yeah.
you gonna yell at me afterwards again?
No, no. When have I yelled at you?
Okay.
Never.
All right, well, thanks for talking with me about incels.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
No, what is this? No, 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 no. Make a proper conclusion.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I opened it. You go ahead.
My conclusion is that I can see the plight of these individuals. I recognize they're reaching out to their society to help them solve a problem, and I see that it seems like all that's happening is bringing that problem out is causing people to do or to take action and behave in ways that they probably never would if they didn't have so much inspiration by other people to do it. So while it is a valuable thing to communicate your discomforts in life, the echo chamber effect can be shown to be devastating to, particular individuals who don't let themselves outside of that echo chamber. This is an example of that, kind of like Democrats.
That's
Anyway,
nice.
and what's your
That's
conclusion?
nicely said. No, no, there was not a specific conclusion. It's just that I mean, I'm kind of happy that we discussed about this because I had to read a lot. So I learned a lot while reading. And as I said, I had this very, very narrow cliche in my mind about what an incel was. And I had no idea, for example, that it had started as a actual, say, it's a safe space of mutual help. Like that was the original idea of it.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. So, I also think that, again, as a feminist, I cannot see how the society that I want to be better can be better if I just focus on women or on just one gender. So, it's kind of a paramount to focus on everyone and to understand the reasons why we are suffering and what's causing the distress. But as a sociologist, again, I think that more of the reasons are social.
Yeah, I agree with that. Social and biological for sure. All
So
right.
you don't agree with that.
Things are
Ah,
so
let's
society is
not,
a bitch.
yeah,
Honestly,
let's
every
not
time you
start.
when you say the word feminism, and that gets translated into my in my mind to society. The same thing with patriarchy, because they're just small cells within the entirety of society. Everybody gets a vote.
We should talk about patriarchy on a specific episode,
You got a deal.
but not the next one. So
Well,
let's just change a little bit, like the nature of the next episode.
sounds good.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thanks for this exploration. It was fun.
thank you.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.